Kia ora everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Renee. I like to read books and then talk about them on the internet. Today I am going to be talking about the books that I read in January. We have 11 in total, which is pretty impressive. I am really happy with the kind of momentum that I have at the start of this year with my reading, and I really hope to keep it up. January was a month that happened and I don't really remember anything else other than these books. That's kind of sad. What's something I can say? January was honestly just pretty bad when it came to weather. We have had the worst summer here in Auckland, and we actually had really bad flooding here last weekend, which was just devastating for a lot of people. So yeah, it hasn't been the best time for a lot of people. That's kind of a bit of a downer, but it's the reality for a lot of families in Auckland at the moment. But it has meant a lot of time for reading and kind of being indoors, so I think that's probably got something to do with why I read so much this month as well. Hoping that February brings some sunshine. So far it hasn't been great, but we're hopeful. First up, in January I read Sweetbitter by Danler. This is a contemporary fictional novel with a romance, food, hospitality genre lens to it. The protagonist is named Tess. She is 22. She's moved to New York, and this is where she has chosen to start her new life. It's very much a coming of age story about her and her experience working in a New York restaurant as a server, the kind of life lessons that she learns there, the people that she meets. She is taken under the wing by an older woman who I don't think is that old. I think she's supposed to be in her like 40s, named Simone, who really takes it upon herself to like teach Tess everything that she knows. There is this complicated, almost masochistic relationship, romance that she has with one of the barmen who works at the restaurant. It's a story that we've all heard and read before. It's not anything new. I think a lot of it is auto-fiction and based on Danler's own experience. She worked in a very famous New York restaurant as a waitress, and I think a lot of this story is taken from that experience. Perhaps not exact details, but it's safe to say that she's probably used that experience in her life to write this book. I did not love this book, to be honest. I felt that given the size of it, it's not a small book, it's like 350 pages, that a lot of it was kind of underdeveloped. I felt like the characters were really shallow and a lot of their behaviours didn't really make sense to me. I found it cheesy in a lot of parts, especially when it came to the dialogue and the way that the characters kind of interacted. It wasn't even a book that I could kind of just get along with in the sense like watching a rom-com. It just had too many things that I found unnecessary, so it made reading it just not a very nice, fun experience. I'm sad that this was the first book that I started the year off with. It seems as though I have some kind of curse where I'm doomed to start my reading years off with bad books, because the same thing happened to me last year. So it is what it is. We can't change it now. Just hoping that next year I make better decisions. So yeah, that was the first book that I read, but it only got better from there, right? That's a positive kind of spin that we can go with it. It did indeed. The next book that I read was Elena Ferrante's Frantumaglia. This is a collection of letters, emails, correspondence, interviews that Elena Ferrante has had over the years, particularly around times when she is having a book published, or a film is being adapted of one of her books, or, you know, magazine articles are being written about her. It's a book about her process of writing and a lot of the ideas and themes that she writes about in her books she expands on in this. Yeah, it's a really kind of insightful look into this mysterious person, and definitely gives an interesting picture to her. This was the last book that I read in my Elena Ferrante reading challenge that I did last year. I made a whole video about that, and I talk about each book a little bit, and then I kind of rank them as well. So if you are interested at all in her writing, or aren't sure who she is and what she's about, and want to know like what I think, go watch that video. This is definitely a book that I would recommend for anyone who likes to read about a writer's craft and their process. Okay, next I read A Single Man by Christopher Isherwood. This is a story set in 1960s California, suburban California. The narrator is a man named George. He is an older gay British academic who is grieving the death of his partner. The book is set over a single day, and we really follow George as he is describing the world that he inhabits and his feelings towards it. He seems to be very angry with the world, and most of his grieving is kind of coming out in that way. I found this one just okay. I did think it was kind of darkly funny, and George's critique of a lot of the different collectives of the time, particularly like his students. I found the way that he spoke about them really funny, and a lot of it was with this kind of witty disdain. I appreciate this for it being a different kind of love story, a different look at a different kind of love, and I guess the perspective of what it is to be the one left behind in that situation, and how we grieve, how we move on, how we continue to live. I just found myself, like, honestly a bit bored while reading this, but I can appreciate it being written at a time where I don't think a lot of these queer stories were being told, and it did have a real kind of beautiful, tender side to it that I did like. Next I read Jumpolihiety's Whereabouts. This is a very melancholy, quiet book about loneliness and introspection. At the center of this we have a unnamed woman narrator who is an academic. She has come to this point in her life where she's feeling a little lost and is unsure of what to do next, I guess career-wise and with her life. Most of the book, the whole book, is made up of her writing about her everyday, the mundane and banal things that she does, and really shows us the kind of the city and the love that she has for it, and almost how it's become this companion to her in this lonely time. I really loved this book. I thought it was just really beautifully written, and the observations that were made about the narrator's everyday just were set as a reminder to kind of stop and take moments to appreciate the small things. I think one of my favourite parts of the book was her describing the ritual of going to her favourite sandwich shop, that whole process of talking with the man who owned it and ordering the same sandwich every single time was just very like I said, banal and everyday, but the way that Jhumpa kind of writes about it gives it this poetic feeling to it, and it's very romanticized, and I really loved the mood of this book. It feels like going to a cafe and sitting down and just people watching all day and making up stories about who they are and what they do and why they're where they are. And yeah, I just really loved that about this book. Next I read Saving Agnes by Rachel Cusk, my first Cusk for the year, and I again just thought it was okay. I wasn't blown away like I normally am by Cusk's fictional writing. I'm wondering if it has anything to do with this being her earlier work and having only read her most recent fiction work. Maybe that involvement has peaked Cusk. She's peaked. The narrator of this book is named Agnes. She is a middle-class English woman living in London, working in a magazine, living with her friends. She is hopelessly romantic and then equally as naive about the world, which I think has a lot to do with her kind of middle-class upbringing. She is spending much of the novel going over remembering a past relationship and kind of trying to be optimistic and positive about it, even though the signs were all there that it perhaps wasn't the best or healthiest relationship for her. This is a very wordy book. I had to go back and read over lines again and again to make sure I understood what exactly it was saying. Yeah, she is definitely doing the most with the word count. I love Cusk's writing. I think she is brilliant, and I'm not saying anything against her ability. It was a lot. It added to the pretentious nature of the book overall, the characters, their kind of inability to be self-aware. So maybe it was purposeful. Maybe she did it on purpose, but something feels as though it's like Cusk definitely flexing her literary muscles for the reader. And also maybe because it's a debut, that has something to do with it as well. That's kind of all I have to say about it. Okay, next I read Jane by Maggie Nelson. This is the story of Maggie Nelson's aunt's murder. She was murdered as a young woman in the 1960s, and it's told in poetry prose style, as well as mixed in with some of Jane's diary entries from when she was a young girl through to like her teenage years, and then right before she is brutally murdered. Yeah, this book was really heartbreaking and at times hard to read, but I felt as though it was a really interesting way to talk about someone and portray their life. I think it definitely set out to do what it says. It pushed my boundaries and understanding of what poetry can do, the types of stories it can tell, and it definitely got me excited about reading more poetry this year. I do think it's an interesting thing to note that this is the second book that I've read by Maggie Nelson where she has told someone else's story or used much of the book to tell someone else's story and then in some way inserted herself in the narrative. I'm not saying whether or not I think that is like right or wrong. It did bring up some questions around kind of our obsession with true crime, particularly with this one. And I also think that it must have been quite hard for her family, who had already dealt with this horrific event happening in their lives, and then it being brought up again for this book can't have been an easy thing for them to have to deal with. So yeah, just questions around that. Yeah, I don't know, if you've read this and have had those thoughts, I would love to hear from you. Okay, next I read How to Loiter in a Turf War by Coco Solid. Hands down favourite book of the month. I absolutely loved this. It's funny, it's nuanced, it's smart, it's witty, and it's so important and very present and speaks to the place that I live and people that I know are experiencing or going through the things that this book touches on. I did a reading vlog on this book. If you want to go watch that, that would be great, and hear me talk a little bit more about my thoughts. I didn't cover everything in that vlog. It's definitely a book that, as I think about it more, I've unpacked a bit more about it. What this book is about, though, is it's set in Auckland, and we have 3 young women who are of Māori and Pacifica descent, and they are in one single day kind of experiencing their neighbourhood and the communities that they're a part of kind of change because of gentrification and colonisation. Each of the characters has their own particular field that they are experiencing and processing these ideas through. We have an artist, we have a poet, and we have an academic, and we really see the different ways that these young women are using those as a way to better understand what these outside oppressions are doing to these communities and also to themselves and the small close-knit group that they have as well. Like I said, it's funny, it's told with like the exact kind of humor that you would expect for big heavy topics like this. It definitely was something that I found so relatable, and it's been a comfort to be able to read this type of story and feel seen, but also have other things to kind of force me to think about. Yeah, I would recommend this book to anyone. You don't have to be living in Aotearoa to know or see these things happening in communities, and yeah, that's why I think it's just such an important book, and I am so glad that I finally read it. Next up, I read Lucy by Jamaica Kincaid. This was my very second favourite book of the month that I read, and I read it as a buddy read with Nathan, and it was so good. I also must say that I read Jane as a buddy read with my friend Sam on Instagram. I'll leave her handle below, and I also read How to Loiter in a Turf War as a buddy read with my friend Mika. I'll also leave her handle below. So it's been a month of buddy reads, but this one was really good. Nathan from Nathan's Nook is a very thoughtful and eloquent and smart reader, and he definitely brought a lot of things to my attention that I probably wouldn't have noticed. So yeah, that was a really lovely buddy reading experience. So thank you to Nathan for choosing this book to read with me. Yeah, I loved this book. Loved Lucy. She is my new favourite fictional character, my new literary crush. She's my girl. This is a coming of age story about Lucy, who is a 19-year-old girl who's left her home in the West Indies to move to New York, where she is a live-in nanny for a white rich family. Right off the bat, we see her as this no bullshit, kind of says it how it is, confident, very self-assured young woman, which I found very interesting given her age and kind of the situation that she was in, being in this new job and this unfamiliar place. I was really blown away with the the attitude of Lucy and just how confident she is in her beliefs, her emotions, her opinions, everything. Throughout the book we do start to see how she has become that way from a childhood filled with lots of disappointment, particularly from her mother. This book definitely feels like a beautiful look at difficult relationships, particularly between mothers and daughters, and how they can kind of create resilience in us, and we can be made stronger and kind of discover and find ways to protect ourselves through these things, but then also they can leave us without and lacking and really missing and grieving those close relationships. I found this book so beautifully written. There are just passages and passages of Lucy's kind of searing thoughts and opinions that I just loved, and she is just the best. And I want a sequel. I want to know what Lucy is up to in her older years, or how she got on as she got older, and yeah, I just want to know what's up with Lucy. Okay, next I've read The Book of Goose by Yiyun. This is a book about two childhood friends, one Agnes and the other Fabienne. The story is narrated from Agnes's perspective as an older woman. She's remembering their childhood together, how when they were younger they would write stories together, and the story that they write becomes widely popular, and becomes published, and but is only published under Agnes's name. And there is this big kind of lie underpinning the whole story. It's about difficult and hard to navigate young female friendships. It's really about that relationship being quite closely knit, and the idea that they cannot operate without each other. You may be thinking, wow, that sounds really familiar. Yeah, that's because it's an exact copy of the My Brilliant Friend novel. Maybe not an exact copy, but it's like very damn close. I could not move past that. It just is not as good as that book, and I cannot for the life of me understand why this has been written and no one ever said to the author, that's very close to like a very, very popular series that everyone loves. For that reason, I just could not get on board with this book. I also thought that it was extremely underwhelming in terms of the story and the plot line. The characters were again extremely underdeveloped, given the fact that they had nearly 350 pages to do that within. Just extremely disappointed and not impressed. Sorry to everyone that loved this book, but I did not. Okay, next I read What We Talk About When We Talk About Love by Raymond Carver. This is a collection of short stories that depict middle America, kind of like the Pacific Northwest, because that's where Raymond Carver was from. And I think where these stories are supposed to be set mostly. Yeah, they're just kind of very sad, melancholy stories about average people and the unfortunate things that happen in life, and the very short moments that we are able to witness, and kind of what we can garner and what we can feel from that through Carver's writing is very impressive. I read this as a part of my book club, and we had our chat about it this morning, and it was surprisingly, I think for a lot of people, we were pleasantly surprised. I wasn't expecting to enjoy this as much as I was when I first started. It took a bit for me to get into the writing and its sparseness, and I think juxtaposed with something like the Rachel Cusk and how wordy that is, and then compare that to this, it does take a bit to get into, but once you're in it, you have all this room to kind of breathe and interpret what is going on between these characters. And yeah, just the way that Carver is able to imbue that in his writing was one of the things that we all kind of found the most impressive. But again, these stories are filled with not a lot of hope, but some funny moments, some real moments of humor and joy to some degree. Overall, I really enjoyed this, and the more I kind of sat and thought about it, the more I was definitely a fan and would like to read more short story collections like this, I think. If anyone has any recommendations, send them my way. Okay, the last book that I read in January was Sunbathing by Isobel Beech. This is a book about a young Australian woman who is grieving the death of her father. I was going to say husband there for a second. Grieving the death of her father, and decides to go to Italy and stay with her friends for a while before they get married. This I thought was going to be a fun, light, easy read. I didn't, when I read the blurb on this book, know that she was grieving the death of her father who suicided. And so going into this book, I was like, oh, it's going to be this fun story about this girl who goes to Italy and like the just like relaxed kind of everyday things that her and her friends do. I was really looking forward to that. This was the complete opposite to that. It was a very heavy, sad, and at some points quite hard to not read, but just they just kind of made my heart ache for this character and the way that she's grieving and the questions that she's asking and the guilt that she feels about her father and his death. It wasn't what I was expecting, but it was still really brilliant, and I really loved this book. It does have some beautiful moments of friendship between the narrator, the main character, and her best friend. It really was depicted in the most perfect way. Very Australian, very not tough love, but that she'll be right attitude, but still kind of layered with a real tender, soft side to it. I don't know how else to describe it other than it felt like a real friendship and like what it would feel like to be going through a grief this deep and sad and unknowing. To have someone who was there for you in that way just felt very real. I also really loved just the way that the story was kind of told through her time in Italy and how it was about being outside, the chores that they would have to do, the way that those kind of structured her life for this period and how that got her through small things like watering the garden or making these really laborious meals, looking after the animals, all these things in this really small village that made for a really pleasant distraction and healthy distraction for the narrator. I really love this book. It was really beautiful and really sad, but feels like it can be a healing thing as well. So that's everything that I read in January. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you read in January, if you've read any of these books, what you think. If you want to fight me in the comments about any of these books, I'm here for it. Yeah, again, thank you for watching. I appreciate and love you all. Ka kite.